Rain in New Orleans has its own unmistakable scent, the distant musk of the bayou, the lingering notes of old jazz drifting in the wind, the secrets floating between the cracks of the French Quarter. But tonight, that rain felt like a cold blade cutting across my skin as I ran through the empty stretch of Bourbon Street. My thin jacket clung to me, my soaked hair dripping down my back, and my sneakers were filled with filthy rainwater. I, Emily Carter, 26 years old, raised in a tiny northern town, never imagined I would someday flee an apartment in Louisiana with nothing but a phone and a few crumpled bills. 3 hours ago, I was still standing in the living room of Daniel Reeves's apartment, staring at the face of the man I once believed I'd marry, and realizing I needed to leave his life, or I wouldn't have a life at all. It wasn't violence. There were no bruises. Daniel was the type who never left marks. He suffocated me with things far more invisible: his words, his control, his calculated smile. I ran because today I found something on his phone, something he forgot to delete an audio file. His voice. Another man's voice. And a name I had never heard before: Henry Sullivan. Just those 2 words felt like a bucket of ice water down my spine. I hadn't even had time to process it before Daniel returned, and the look in his eyes when he saw me, it was a look I never wanted to see again. So I ran, into the rain. No plan, no friends, no safe place. Through the curtain of rain, a neon red sign suddenly flickered into view. The black lantern. The red glow was like a flame cutting through darkness. Beautiful, eerie, unmistakably New Orleans, yet dangerous. I pushed open the door. Inside was an entirely different world. Warm amber lights, a low, smoky jazz piano, the scent of oak wood and whiskey drifting lazily in the air. The bar was far more elegant than anything I expected from a place tucked between old brick buildings. The man behind the counter looked at me with sharp, dark eyes, not harsh, but piercing. Black shirt, leather apron, a stern face that wasn't unfriendly. He asked, "You all right, miss?" His voice was deep, slightly husky, with a faint southern drawl. "I just need somewhere to sit. And something warm to drink." My voice trembled, whether from the cold, the fear, or from seeing 11 missed calls from Daniel on my phone, I couldn't tell. The bartender studied me for a few seconds, as if evaluating whether to trust me. Just as I feared he might throw me out, he turned away and said, "Take the corner booth. I'll bring something over." I exhaled in relief. Not everyone would let a drenched, shaken stranger shelter in their bar at midnight. I slid into the booth, where the dim lighting fell gently, like a curtain hiding the chaos in my chest. The bar wasn't crowded. A few older patrons quietly sipped their drinks. A couple whispered to each other. A tall man sat alone at the counter, his expression unreadable. The bartender returned with a cup of hot cocoa and a soft towel. "Here, your hands are turning purple." "Thank you. What's your name, Miles?" he replied. "And yours?" "Emily." Miles nodded as if committing it to memory before walking away. I cupped the warm mug, the heat slowly seeping into my palms. But my mind wouldn't stop spinning with one question. Who is Henry Sullivan? Why was his name on Daniel's phone? And why did Daniel look terrified of him? Curiosity numbered to dread, a deep, terrible dread. I didn't get to think any further. The door opened. A soft chime rang, and the atmosphere of the bar shifted instantly, as if someone had walked in and pulled a strange wind behind him. Several customers turned. Silence spread sharp and sudden. Miles straightened. Instinctively, I looked up. And my heart stopped. The man who just walked in didn't look like he belonged to this world. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark brown hair slicked back, a charcoal suit cut perfectly against a strong frame. The lights fell across his angular features, making his face look sculpted, cold, enigmatic. He didn't acknowledge anyone. He simply shrugged off his coat and handed it to the man near the door, a man who looked unmistakably like a bodyguard. Then he turned his head and looked directly at me. His gaze cut through the haze of warmth through the rain outside, straight into the deepest part of my mind. I jerked my head away, but I still felt his eyes, heavy, sharp, like a blade brushing the side of my throat. Miles approached him and said something quietly. The man didn't respond. He just glanced at me again longer this time, more deliberate. Then he began walking toward my table. Each step was controlled quiet but full of power, as if the wooden floor shifted to make room for him rather than dare creak beneath his weight. My hand tightened around the mug until it burned. He stopped in front of me. "Is this seat taken?" His voice was low, deep husky, like an old jazz record dusted with age. No." He sat leaning slightly toward me, his dark eyes drawing me in like a whirlpool. I heard Miles approaching, maybe intending to interrupt, but the man lifted a hand, just a small gesture, and Miles backed away immediately. Power. I felt it in every breath he took. He studied me for a few seconds before asking, "Who are you running from?" I nearly dropped the mug. I'm not. I'm just hiding from the rain. He glanced at my phone lying face down on the table. It lit up with a new message, Daniel Reeves, a text Emily. "Answer me. Don't make me come find you." The man at my table tilted his head slightly, a faint curl appearing at the corner of his lips. A smile, but not really. "Hiding from the rain." "Your phone says otherwise." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "Who are you?" "Why do you care?" He answered simply, eyes never leaving mine. "Because you walked into my bar." I froze. "This is your bar." "Henry Sullivan." He said it slowly, each syllable deliberate as if ensuring I understood. My blood ran cold. That name, the name I saw on Daniel's phone only hours ago. A chill crawled up my spine. Henry rested one elbow on the table, his expression unchanged, but his voice dropping lower. "Daniel Reeves. He's your ex-boyfriend." I widened my eyes, and somehow I knew I couldn't lie to this man. I nodded. Henry lifted a brow as if he'd already expected that answer. He leaned in slightly, his voice calm, steady, like rain tapping on a window pane. "You shouldn't go back to him." Not a suggestion. A warning. Why I tried to keep my voice steady. "You know, Daniel?" Henry gazed at me for a long, long moment, as if weighing whether to give me a sliver of truth. Finally, he spoke a sentence that paralyzed me. "Know him. Daniel owes me money. And he owes me a life." The words struck the air like thunder, splitting the room, splitting my breath. And everything clicked. Why Daniel panicked. Why he tried to pull me out of New Orleans. Why he hid the name Henry Sullivan in his phone. I stared at the man before me, someone revealing something monstrous with the calmness of someone discussing the weather. Henry's eyes held no anger, no threat, which somehow felt far more dangerous. They were completely calm. "And now you're in my bar." Coincidence? Or fate? He paused. "Tonight, Emily Carter, you shouldn't be out there alone." I froze. He knew my name. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Henry smiled a smile that made my pulse skip, yet set every alarm bell ringing. "You think Daniel is the only one looking for you? If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. The moment Henry Sullivan said my name and implied Daniel wasn't the only one looking for me, every sound inside the bar seemed to freeze. Only the rain outside remained beating steadily against the windows, heavy and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of someone chasing me from the shadows. I stared at Henry, searching for something in his eyes, a hint of goodwill, a trace of exaggeration, even a touch of dry humor. But there was nothing. Only that unsettling calm. A man stating the truth as if he were talking about the weather. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice so small I barely recognized it. Henry didn't answer immediately. He rose from his seat, stepped around the table, and sat down beside me instead of across from me. Now the distance between us was a single breath. His warmth mingled with the oak wood scent drifting through the air. His gaze shifted to my phone, still lighting up with another message from Daniel. "You're not allowed to run anymore. I'm taking you home." "Don't test me, Emily." Henry tilted his head, his voice low. "He's getting bold." "That's not good." "Not good." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Do you even know what's happening between me and Daniel?" Or are you judging based on a few texts? Henry looked at me, unhurried, unbothered. Judging? No, Emily. I know far more about him than you do. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. Are you following me or following him? Henry didn't answer right away. He rested his arm along the back of the booth, turning slightly toward me. His eyes were so dark they didn't reflect the lights, they swallowed them. Where did you come from before stepping inside Daniel Reeves? A man who controls, a man who hides too much, a man drowning in debt, and a man who is desperate. It felt like Henry wasn't deducing anything. He was recounting it like he'd known long before tonight. I whispered, half suspicious, half terrified. Why do you know so much about Daniel? Henry lowered his eyes to his hand, slowly turning a minimalist black ring on his index finger. Such a small gesture, yet it made me feel he was calculating something far more complex than his words revealed. Because he touched something he shouldn't have. I frowned. You mean money business? Or Henry cut me off. Not just that, Emily. He dragged you into something you don't even realize you're a part of. My heart tightened. What are you talking about? Before Henry could answer, the man near the door, the one I assumed was a bodyguard, walked toward us and leaned close to Henry. Boss, there's movement outside. Black car. Texas plates. Same plate number Daniel Reeves filed in the report. I froze. Our report? What report? The bodyguard glanced at me, then looked to Henry for instruction. Henry nodded once. The man stepped back immediately. Henry turned to me. Daniel is outside. He's looking for you. But that's not the part that bothers me most. I felt like the floor had opened beneath me. Then what bothers you? Henry leaned back, arms crossed, posture straight, eyes sharpening like blades. That he didn't come alone. That he brought someone with him. And that person isn't police, isn't a friend, isn't a coworker. He tilted his head slightly, his voice dropping. He brought someone who belongs to a place extremely dangerous. For me, my heart hammered harder. Fear beginning its slow spread. Why am I involved with dangerous people? I'm just trying to get out of a toxic relationship. Henry shook his head faintly. You think Daniel only controlled you emotionally? Did you never wonder why he suddenly moved to New Orleans? How he always had money despite owing so many people? How he knew your every move? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Henry watched me, not pitying, but seeing too clearly. Daniel isn't just your ex, Emily. He's a small link in a money laundering chain I've been watching for a long time. He's not smart enough to run anything. He's a puppet. And you? He paused. The silence thickened. You're what they're using to keep him in line. My blood felt like ice. I shook my head. Me, I'm just an office worker. I'm not worth enough to be used as leverage. Henry held my gaze. You don't understand, Emily. Men like Daniel choose women they think they can control easily. And when needed, they turn them into excuses, trophies, bargaining pieces. His words made my stomach twist. Henry continued, he couldn't handle you leaving today. Not because of love, but because you're considered property. You leaving sent him into panic. He had to call his superiors. And that's why the Texas car is out there. I pulled away slightly, my vision blurring. I didn't know. I never... Henry cut in gently but firmly. I know. You weren't supposed to know. Sometimes innocence leads you into places you never meant to be. I hugged my arms to myself, a cold crawling up my spine. And you? Why do you care? You don't have to get involved. Henry studied me for a long moment. Then he leaned closer, the distance shrinking until I could smell him sandalwood and a faint touch of smoke. Emily, you didn't step into my bar by accident tonight. I frowned. What does that mean? He placed a hand on the table close to mine, so close heat brushed my skin like a quiet warning. You said you'd never heard the name Henry Sullivan before today. Right? Right? Henry leaned in, eyes locked onto mine. Then why did the recording you found in Daniel's phone contain my name? I froze. He knew. He knew everything. My skin went cold, my heart pounding. Henry continued, voice barely above a whisper. That's why I'm telling you. You didn't wander into my life by coincidence. You were pulled into it long before you realized. By someone using you to play a game with me. My breath hitched. You mean, Daniel and that person want to trick you? Henry's mouth curved faintly, a smile without warmth. Not trick. Challenge. I shivered, not entirely from fear, but from not knowing who exactly I was sitting beside. And you? What will you do? Henry didn't answer right away. He set his hand on the back of the booth, leaned in so close his voice brushed against my skin. I'll destroy anything that threatens you. That's the only thing I'm certain of right now. My eyes widened. Why? Why do you care about me? We barely know each other. Henry paused, a long, deliberate pause, like he was deciding whether to say something painfully honest. Then he spoke. Slow, clear, every word landing straight in my chest. Because from the moment you walked in, you stopped being outside the story. I tightened my hands in my lap. You mean I can't go back? Henry's gaze was unreadable, half warning, half something like reassurance. It's not that you can't go back. It's that they won't let you go back to the life you had. His voice softened, yet deepened. And if you don't choose to protect yourself, they'll make the choice for you. I swallowed hard, breath shaky. Henry held my eyes, his own dark and unwavering. But you don't need to worry. I'll take care of the rest. I opened my mouth. But why would you? For the first time in our entire conversation, Henry cut me off with a line that made every thought inside me stop. Because you don't understand yet, Emily. But starting tonight, you fall under my protection. Before I could react, thunder cracked outside. The bar door burst open. The bodyguard rushed in, boss. They're inside, Daniel Reeves. And the other guy. Henry stood in one swift motion, eyes turning sharp. Take Emily upstairs. Now. I was barely on my feet when Henry brushed his fingers lightly against my hand, a fleeting touch. But not accidental, not even close. He murmured low enough for only me to hear. From here on, nothing will be the same, Emily. And I won't let anyone lay a hand on you, not even once. I was pulled away before I could process what that meant, but something inside me knew. The door I was being led through wasn't just to the upstairs floor. It was the doorway into a world I never knew I was about to enter. The staircase leading to the second floor of the Black Lantern was narrow and dim, the wall lamps set deliberately low, casting a faint golden haze. Miles walked ahead of me, his steps quick but never frantic like someone used to escorting people upstairs, in situations best kept away from curious eyes. I gripped the wooden railing, my hand still trembling slightly after Henry's last words. From tonight on, you fall under my protection. Protection. A word that felt both like a shield and a chain. When the heavy wooden door opened at the top, I expected a small office, maybe a storage room. But no. What appeared was far more spacious, decorated in dark wood soft lighting, elegant in a way that didn't match the rustic charm of the bar below. It was a subtle contradiction, a New Orleans-style bar downstairs. But up here, the private space of a powerful, discreet man. Miles spoke softly. Stay here for now. Don't leave the room unless the boss says so. I frowned. Says so? I'm not his employee. Miles glanced at me, not defiant, not annoyed, but sympathetic, I know. But Henry isn't the kind of man who repeats himself. And tonight, he's unusually firm. He paused, then added quietly, just think of this as me helping you stay alive. A chill ran down my spine. Miles placed a hand on the doorknob, ready to leave. I called out instinctively. Do you know who Daniel brought with him? Miles froze. I do. Who is it? He turned, and for the first time since we'd come upstairs, he looked directly at me. Someone even we don't want to face. But he's not here because of Henry. He's here because of you. My throat tightened. Miles said only one last thing. Don't open the door. No matter what you hear. Then he slipped out, closing the door behind him, leaving me with nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my chest. I moved toward the room's single small window and pulled the curtain aside. Rain still lashed against the glass, long streaks distorting the view of the street below. Through the neon red reflection of the black lantern sign, two figures near a black car immediately caught my attention. One of them I recognized instantly, Daniel Reeves. Dark jacket hood up, his movements agitated. The other man was taller, straighter, hands in his coat pockets not bothering with shelter despite the violent rain. I couldn't see his face, but something in his stance made my stomach twist. No ordinary person stands in cold rain like that. My breath caught when realization hit. They're waiting for Henry. Suddenly, the door to the room shuddered as if someone had bumped into it. I jumped back immediately. Emily Henry's voice. My breath came too fast. The door swung open. Henry stepped inside, rain on his shoulders, breath heavy as if he'd been moving quickly. His eyes swept over me, scanning as if checking for injuries. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I meant it. Henry shut the door behind him, locked it, then leaned against it like he was physically holding the world outside at bay. He didn't speak for several seconds. I finally asked Daniel, and that man with him, "Who is he?" Henry approached slowly, every step deliberate. He didn't touch me, but the heat radiating from him steadied the panic in my chest. "His name is Von Hale, a man who has no business being here unless he intends to challenge me." The name felt foreign, yet sharp like a blade against my fear. "Who is he?" Henry sat on the edge of the table, arms folded. The warm light sculpted his features, making him look dangerous and unavoidably magnetic. If Daniel is a man who knows fear, then Vaughn is the man who teaches it. I swallowed hard. Henry continued, his voice low, but softening slightly when he saw my expression. "You haven't seen his real threat, Emily. He doesn't need to yell. He doesn't need to strike. His silence is what keeps people awake at night. But why would he come with Daniel to find me?" Henry watched me silently for a moment. Then he said something I never expected. "Because you became the collateral Daniel offered in place of a debt he can't repay." My breath hitched. I don't have anything to do with any of them. I'm just an ordinary person. Henry, Henry stood and moved toward me. His hands rested on my shoulders, gentle but firm enough to steady me. "I know. You're the only ordinary person in this entire game. And that's exactly why you're the easiest to pull into it." Instinctively, I grabbed his hands, clinging to the only thing stopping me from collapsing. But Henry's gaze deepened, not pity, not confusion. He was studying me. "Are you afraid of me, Emily?" The question stunned me. I shook my head, then nodded slightly, then wasn't sure anymore. I don't know, but I know I don't want to be out there with Daniel and that man. A faint smile touched Henry's lips, barely there but real. Not mocking, not arrogant, relieved. As if he'd been worried I might fear him so much I'd try to run. Henry let go of me and walked to a wooden cabinet. He opened it, pulled out a soft towel, and handed it to me. "Dry your hair. You're shaking from the cold." I took the towel, staring at him. "You're not going to ask me anything about why I ran from Daniel the audiophile the nights when I... No." Henry cut in gently. "I won't ask you anything until you're ready to talk." His voice was steady, not even a hint of doubt. Why, I asked quietly. "You know so much, but refuse to press me for answers." Henry slipped his hands into his pockets, leaning against the cabinet. "Because to the people hunting you, your fear is the perfect bait. I won't corner you the way they want you cornered." I had no response. His words weren't comforting. They were simply true, spoken with a rare kindness from a man whose world likely had no place for kindness. Henry watched me for a moment, then asked, "Do you trust me?" Such a short question, such a difficult one. I looked into his eyes, dark, deep, reflecting the soft yellow light like still water. But beneath that stillness, danger, not aimed at me, but at everything threatening me. I trust you, more than I trust Daniel. I don't know if I can trust you fully, but I'm not afraid of you. Henry closed his eyes for a brief second, so brief it was almost unnoticeable, like he was containing a feeling he didn't intend to show. When he opened them, his gaze had changed. Softer, warmer, and filled with a determination he didn't bother to hide. "That's enough," he murmured. "As long as you're not afraid of me, I'll take care of everything else." I inhaled sharply. "What about Daniel?" "And Vaughn?" Henry took a step closer. I caught the faint scent on his clothes, warm, grounded, strangely fitting the rainy New Orleans night. He said, "I'll deal with both of them. But first, there's something you need to understand." I looked at him, waiting. Henry lowered his head slightly, the distance between us shrinking to one breath. "What you experienced tonight is only the surface. The moment you found that audio file, you stepped into a war that was never yours." He paused. "And you can't go back to normal anymore, Emily." My chest tightened. Henry held my gaze, his voice dropping to a level that felt like it reached the deepest parts of me. "But I swear, in this war, you will not walk alone." Downstairs, the bar's door slammed, a heavy, ominous sound like something had arrived. Henry turned sharply, positioning himself between me and the window. His stance was unmistakable, protective, but not from the rain, not from Daniel, not from Vaughn, from a much larger darkness, one already pushing its way into my life. A darkness tied directly to Henry Sullivan, and to the name Vaughn Hale, a man I had never met, but who hated Henry more than I ever imagined. The sounds rising from downstairs echoed like the collision of two worlds, one ruled by Henry, the unnervingly calm man I barely understood, and the other waiting for him behind the bar's front door. I stood behind him close enough to feel the tension in his shoulders, but far too far from understanding the storm about to break over my life. Henry didn't look back at me when he said, "Don't leave this room. No matter who knocks, don't open the door." His voice was as if hammered from steel, low cold, steady enough to terrify me. Not because of him, but because of whatever could make this man so alert. I grabbed the sleeve of his coat instinctively. "Henry, if this mess is because of me..." He turned, slightly resting his hand over mine, the gesture gentle yet grounding. "None of this is your fault, and I'm not letting you pay for what someone else caused." His words felt like a promise. Before I could respond, Henry slipped his hand away and opened the door. For a heartbeat, his silhouette vanished down the staircase, taking the room's remaining warmth with him. The door shut, the silence closed in, and I was alone. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The rain had eased, but the air still felt heavy, as though the storm hadn't left, only stepped aside for a different kind of fury. Below, 3 cars were parked at sharp angles, like arrows aimed at the black lantern. 2 unknown, one unmistakably Daniel's. But what made my chest tighten wasn't Daniel. It was the man beside him. Even through the dark coat he wore, he stood perfectly still, no umbrella, no flinch, no impatience. And though I couldn't see his face, I knew it was Vaughn Hale. Not because Henry had warned me, but because silence like that could only belong to someone dangerous. Daniel was jittery, looking around, nervous. Vaughn didn't move at all, as if he wasn't there for me, or for Daniel, but for something or someone entirely his own. I let the curtain fall and backed away. A cold premonition crept up my spine. Footsteps echoed faintly from below. Not chaos, not shouting. Too quiet, far too quiet. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear. Then a voice carried upward, a deep, velvety voice with an edge of cold steel. Not Henry, a voice that felt like black velvet dragged across my skin. "Henry Sullivan. Keeping me waiting in the rain isn't very courteous of you, Vaughn." I had never heard him before yet. The sound of his voice made my heart drop to my stomach. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It belonged to someone who never needed volume to punish. A brief pause. Henry replied, his tone as calm as if he were speaking over dinner. "If you wanted courtesy, Vaughn, you wouldn't have shown up with someone like Daniel Reeves." A soft chuckle answered him, so faint it felt like a blade brushing a table's edge. "Daniel is merely a guide." Vaughn continued, "I came for something else." Silence. The air thickened. Then he spoke the sentence that made my legs nearly give out. I came for your girl. My hand clamped around my sleeve, breath trapped in my throat. Your girl. Those words stabbed into me sharper than fear. I didn't know how Henry reacted. But Vaughn's voice came again, almost amused. Don't tell me you thought I wouldn't know she's here. A few seconds stretched painfully long. Then Henry answered, his voice lower-edged with warning on, Don't test your luck tonight. The room seemed to freeze. A chair scraped against the floor. Footsteps shifted. Vaughn laughed softly, devoid of humor. I enjoy seeing you irritated, Henry, because you only lose control when it involves a woman. I slapped a hand over my mouth, stifling the sound of my own breathing. Another long silence. I could feel Henry holding himself together. Tightly. Then Vaughn spoke again, calm, clinical, terrifying. We both want the same thing. Henry, and you know it's not Daniel, but the girl you're hiding. A light tapping echoed downstairs, a hand brushing the table, almost polite but heavy as a verdict. Bring her down here. I stumbled back as if shoved. A loud noise echoed below, but not fighting. A chair tipping over. Vaughn's voice turned colder. You think you can hide her forever? You think I don't know what Daniel gave her? That recording, if someone else hears it, you'll lose far more than a girl. I pressed a hand to my chest, heart pounding wildly. The recording? Why did it matter to Henry? Before I could think, footsteps stormed up the stairs. Quick, controlled, purposeful. I pressed against the wall, shaking too hard to grab anything for defense. The door burst open. I screamed, but the sound died instantly when I recognized him. Henry! He slammed the door, turned the lock, and faced me. For the first time, his face wasn't calm. Not panicked. Not afraid. But angry. A deep, heavy anger that lived beneath his stillness like dark water churning under ice. Henry, what's happening? I stammered. He stepped toward me but stopped just short of touching me. Then slowly, he spoke each word, a weight dropping between us. You need to leave, now. But why Daniel only? Not Daniel. Henry cut in sharply. Vaughn wants you. The blood drained from my face. Why does he want me? Henry's eyes darkened, swallowing the last traces of light. Because you have something that belongs to him. And worse, he thinks I'm hiding you to take it for myself. Take what I whispered. Henry's voice dropped. It wasn't gentle. It was the truth unsoftened, Emily. You got entangled in what Daniel did with Vaughn's people. You heard something you shouldn't have. You touched something you shouldn't have touched. And now, in Vaughn's eyes, you're no longer an outsider. He stepped closer. Your leverage. My knees nearly gave out. Henry reached me then. His fingers lifted gently to my chin, guiding my gaze to his. Listen to me, Emily Carter. He does not get to lay a hand on you. He leaned in so close, his breath brushed my lips. His voice was a blade wrapped in velvet, because the moment you stepped into this place, you became part of it. And part of me. My heart thundered. I opened my mouth, words failing, when the door rattled softly. Not a knock. A hand. Testing the handle from outside. Henry's eyes locked onto mine. Only time to whisper 2 words. Don't be afraid. Then he turned, placing himself between me and the door, just as the handle shifted again, as if someone outside was deciding whether to try forcing it open. And in that instant, I knew tonight, Daniel wasn't the only one looking for me. The soft turn of the door handle froze the entire room. The sound was faint, yet sharp enough to send fear crawling up my spine like a cold hand. Henry stood in front of me, his tall frame blocking most of the light from the ceiling lamp. His shoulder angled slightly, his posture like a predator guarding its territory. Henry? I whispered. He reached back, placing his palm lightly against my stomach, urging me to step further away. Such a small gesture, yet it stole the breath from my lungs. There was something in the way he protected me that made my chest tighten, not just with fear, but with a strange sense of belonging. The door rattled again, but it didn't open. Footsteps retreated. 1 step. 2, fading into the silence. Henry stayed still for a few more seconds, ensuring whoever was outside had truly left. Not until voices drifted from downstairs chairs scraping someone speaking Vaughn's low chuckle, like the breath of a man accustomed to playing with shadows, did Henry finally lower his hand. He turned toward me and studied me for a long moment. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, though my legs trembled so hard I could barely stand. Henry stepped closer, gripping my shoulders gently yet firmly. When he spoke, his voice was low, so steady it made me feel safer than any locked door. "No one can get in here, Emily. Remember that." I looked up at him, and even though fear still knotted inside me, his presence pushed back the darkness around the edges. "Why did he come up here?" I whispered. "He knows I'm here." Henry didn't answer immediately. He touched my cheek lightly, calming the panic he saw in my eyes, before telling me something even more terrifying. "Vaughn doesn't need to see you to know where you are. He just has to think the way I do." My heartbeat stumbled. "You mean he's like you?" Henry let out a short laugh, one without amusement. "No, he's not like me. He's what I once came dangerously close to becoming." The air tightened around us. I wanted to ask more. But downstairs, another noise rose, glass hitting wood. Then a voice, sharp and unmistakably dangerous. "I'm not leaving until I see her, Henry." "Vaughn." I froze. Henry's hands tightened slightly on my shoulders, as if to steady me. "Sit down." His voice was firm, grounding. "I'll talk to him." "But he's not seeing you. You're going to face him alone." Henry didn't hesitate. Facing him is the one thing I'm still good at. A part of me wanted to stop him, to pull him away from the danger that came because of me. But when I met his eyes, the eyes of a man who had walked through darkness long enough to understand its rules, I knew nothing I said could change his decision. He opened the door, but before stepping out, he turned back once more. In that moment, Henry wasn't a mafia boss, nor a dangerous man. He was someone torn between what he wanted to do and what he knew he had to do. He gently lifted my chin with 2 fingers. "Emily." "Yes, no matter what happens downstairs, don't come down." His voice dropped into a warning made of steel. "And don't say my name." I opened my mouth to respond, but he'd already shut the door. The sound was soft. The meaning was final. Downstairs grew louder. I sat in the chair by the window, too afraid to move closer. The rain outside had calmed, but the voices in the bar only sharpened. Henry spoke first. Calm, cold, unyielding. "She has nothing to do with this Vaughn. Daniel dragged her in to hide the fact he betrayed us." Vaughn let out a quiet laugh. "Betrayed who, me or you?" Henry didn't answer, and his silence struck harder than any word. Vaughn continued. "Daniel said she heard something she shouldn't have." A sharp clink, Henry slamming a glass onto the counter. "He lied." "But you can't guarantee she didn't hear anything." Vaughn's voice was velvet over a blade. "You're not as good at hiding women as you think, Henry." A chair scraped violently. Henry's voice followed, low and lethal. "I'll say this once more. She knows nothing, and this has nothing to do with you." On the contrary, Vaughn's tone chilled the air. "If she knows my name, it has everything to do with me." I pressed my hand over my mouth. I did know his name. I heard it from Henry, which meant I had already stepped somewhere I shouldn't have. Henry's voice dropped no fear, just compressed fury. "Leave her out of this." "You've changed, Henry." Vaughn laughed softly. "A man like you only becomes reckless when a woman is involved." "A weakness? Interesting." I bit my lip until I tasted blood. Then Vaughn spoke the words that hollowed out my insides. "Let me be blunt. Daniel didn't choose her himself. He was ordered to follow her for months." My entire body went numb. "Ordered? Follow me." The world turned silent inside my head. Henry reacted instantly, sharp, furious. "That's a lie. I don't lie," Vaughn replied smoothly. "And you know Daniel isn't clever enough to set that trap. Someone wanted to see how Henry Sullivan would react when an innocent girl got pulled into your mess." My pulse stopped for a beat. "Destiny. No. Not destiny. Someone had deliberately placed me in the crosshairs. Not Daniel, not Vaughn, someone else. Henry's next words came out like frozen steel. "If you're telling the truth, then who ordered it?" Vaughn laughed again, soft, dangerous. "Don't pretend to be stupid. Who else but the one who wants to invite you back to the Sullivan family?" The floor dropped beneath me. The Sullivan family. Henry had never spoken of his family. Not once. Vaughn continued, voice calm as a scalpel. "And she is just a reminder." A violent thud, a hand slamming the table hard, made me flinch. Henry's voice was ice-breaking. "Emily has nothing to do with my family's games. Touch her, and you touch me." Silence. Then Vaughn's chilling reply. "Then, let's see, how long you can protect her." A chair was shoved back. Footsteps. The bar door opened. Vaughn was leaving. But just before he stepped outside, he spoke one last line, too soft, yet sharp enough to cut through walls. "The more you hide her, Henry, the more your family will want her." I sank onto the edge of the bed, heart aching with a cold, sinking realization. I wasn't just pulled into Daniel's chaos. I was pulled into something Henry had been running from his entire life. And the most terrifying part wasn't Vaughn. It was the Sullivan family. I was still sitting on the edge of the bed when the sound of the door closing downstairs echoed upward. A sharp final click. The sound of someone leaving, yet leaving behind something heavier than their presence, a secret newly unearthed. The Sullivan family. Vaughn had spoken the name as if delivering a sentence. I knew nothing about Henry, nothing about the past. He hid the family he avoided, or the family Vaughn mentioned with such disdain. But the way Henry reacted, I knew it wasn't simple. The door to the room swung open. Henry walked in, his eyes darker than the storm outside. He didn't look around. He didn't ask whether I'd heard. He knew I had. "Emily," his voice was low, not angry but heavy, guarded. "Are you all right?" I swallowed, struggling to steady my breath. "You're going to tell me what's going on, right?" Henry stopped right in front of me, placing his hands gently but firmly on my arms, as if checking whether I was still shaking. "If you want to know, I'll tell you. But before I begin, remember this one thing. None of this is your fault." I looked into his eyes, deep, cold, edged with steel, but with a faint, fragile gleam buried beneath. The last remaining piece of someone who had once known how to love before darkness swallowed everything else. "Then, what is the Sullivan family?" I whispered. "And why do they want you back?" Henry exhaled slowly, the kind of breath taken by someone who's lived many years in silence, yet no longer has the luxury of hiding. "Emily?" He began, his voice, steady, eyes drifting toward the shadow behind me. "You know I run a few businesses, a few networks." I nodded. I'd never asked for details. Everyone has a past they aren't ready to open. Henry continued. "Those front-facing businesses, that's just the surface. The Sullivan family, my family, controls everything underneath it. A structure that's existed for more than 60 years. Smuggling, laundering, underground finance, political leverage, protection rackets, and even purges." His tone carried no pride, no defensiveness. Just truth. I grew up inside that world. I walked away when I was 27, built my own path, kept my distance. But they never considered me out. I went still. "So, you were once part of them." Henry looked at me, not asking for forgiveness, not trying to soften the blow, accepting that I might walk away right now. "Yes, since I was 15. My heart twisted, not from fear but from sorrow. A 15-year-old should be holding books, not whatever a powerful criminal dynasty forced into his hands. "But you left," I said quietly. Henry tilted his head slightly, a silent acknowledgement that my statement was only half right. "Do you really think anyone just leaves a family like that? It's easier to get in, far harder to get out." But what chilled my blood was his next sentence. "Daniel never loved you. Not once. He approached you because the Sullivan family ordered it." All sound disappeared. Only the pounding of my heart remained. "Why? Me? Henry tightened his hold on my hands as if grounding me through the shock. Because you accidentally became my weakness. I froze. But at that time, I didn't even know you. But the family did, Henry said quietly. They wanted to see whether I was still as cold as they raised me, or whether I'd changed. Changed because of who I asked, though the answer made my chest burn. Henry's eyes locked with mine deep enough to pull the air from my lungs. Because of you, Emily. My thoughts stalled. Since the first time I saw you? 8 months ago. My heart kicked stumbling. I didn't even meet you then, but I met you, Henry replied, voice rougher now. At your bookstore. I walked in looking for a quiet place. But when I saw you, I couldn't look away. I remembered. Maybe I had smiled at someone that day. A tall man in simple clothes, sharp eyes that followed me in silence. Someone I dismissed as a passing customer. But to him, that had been the beginning. I came back many times, always keeping my distance. I thought the best thing I could do for you was to stay out of your life. But the family noticed before I did. My heart ached. He tried to protect me by staying away. Yet that distance was the very reason I got dragged in. So Vaughn, I whispered. Who is he? Henry's grip tightened. Someone I once called a brother. Not anymore. He closed his eyes briefly, pain flickering across his features. He's loyal to the family, loyal to my father. A chill slid down my spine. Your father? He still runs the family. Henry shook his head. No, but he wants me back. And Vaughn is his most obedient hound. I clutched Henry's sleeve. So I'm... An excuse, no, Henry said firmly. You're the target. The family knows you're the one thing that could make me walk away from everything. So they want to see how far I'll go to protect you. And Vaughn wants to find the limits of my restraint. I trembled. Henry pulled me into his arms. His embrace was strong, but there was a faint tremor in it like nothing had terrified him in years except the thought of me being dragged into his darkness. I'm sorry, he whispered against my ear. I should have left the city the moment I realized Daniel was watching you. I underestimated my family and overestimated my ability to protect you from afar. Henry, I pressed my hand against his chest. You've saved me, more than once. He didn't answer. He just held me tighter, confirming to himself that I was still here. Some moments later, Henry pulled out a chair and sat across from me, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen. Emily, you need to understand this. The moment Vaughn stepped into the bar, you became someone the Sullivan family wants to observe. I swallowed. What will you do? Henry stared into my eyes, weighing every consequence, every risk before uttering 2 words. My heart tightened. Leave. Where this city? Your apartment? Your job? Everything. My lips parted, but no words came. Henry continued. You can choose to come with me, or let me go alone. But I will not let the Sullivan family touch you. My eyes stung. You would abandon everything, Henry nodded once. For you, I'd abandon the world. No boasting, no dramatization, just a truth spoken with painful sincerity. But you need to know this first. Henry said slowly, his hand gripping mine. If we leave, there's no turning back, and the family will see it as a declaration of war. I inhaled sharply. War. Against your own bloodline. Henry nodded again. And in that moment, I realized I was not being dragged into Henry's world. Henry was preparing to walk away from his world for me. Night wind slipped through the tall window, carrying with it a strange chill, like a whisper that something was drawing near. I sat frozen in front of Henry. Fingers interlaced, my heart tangled with more than fear. It was the weight of a choice too big, too irreversible. To leave, to abandon everything, and to accept a war with the very people who shared Henry's blood. I hadn't spoken yet when Henry rose, stepping out of the dim corner and into the soft orange glow of the bedside lamp. In that moment, I saw the exhaustion on his face. Not physical exhaustion, but the weariness deep in his eyes, the kind that grows after standing too long on the border between right and wrong. Henry sat beside me. He didn't touch me. He didn't push. He simply looked. Emily, will you listen to me? I nodded. I don't want you making any choice while you're still afraid. I want you to think with a clear heart, not a panicked one. I let out a small, sad laugh. The truth is, it's the clear-headed part of me that scares me most. Henry frowned slightly. A shadow passed over his eyes, confusion mixed with concern. What do you mean? I drew in a deep breath. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I'm scared of losing you. Henry didn't blink. He didn't inhale. He didn't exhale. He went still like my words froze something inside him he wasn't ready to show. After a long moment, he closed his eyes. A long, heavy breath. As if what I said reached a place in him he hadn't touched in years. Then he opened them again slowly. Emily, even now, I still can't quite believe you said that. He tilted his head, voice dropping lower. But you have to understand something. Staying with me might make you lose me, just in a different way. I narrowed my eyes. A different way? Henry stood and walked a few steps, then turned, palms bracing against the wall behind him, body leaning forward as if pulled toward me. I can protect you from Daniel, from Vaughn, from anyone who wants to test how far they can push me. He paused, his gaze sinking deeper into me. But I can't promise I can protect you from my world. I opened my mouth to argue, but Henry lifted a hand, silencing me gently. Emily, the world I come from isn't like anything you've ever known. There's no law, no mercy, and no exit. He stepped toward me, each step heavy, as if walking into a memory that hurt. If you stay, I'll become their target, and you will be their leverage. I looked at him, and what struck me wasn't the coldness of his words. It was the faint tremor in his hands. Henry never trembled. Then what do you plan to do? I whispered. You say leave, but leave. Where Henry sat, again taking my hand, not tightly, but as if asking for permission. Chicago, Seattle, even Canada if we have to. I have safe places in more cities than you can imagine, as long as you come with me. I stared at his hand covering mine, warm, strong. Yet under the skin, I could feel the tension coiled tight. And if I don't go, I asked softly, if I choose to stay here to keep my life the way it is? Henry looked at me for a very long time. So long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he lowered his forehead to mine, breath warm across my lips. If you don't go, I'll stay. My eyes widened. But you said staying is dangerous for both of us. Henry gave a soft, aching smile, so beautiful, yet so painful. There are battles I can run from. But if a battle threatens the woman I love, then even if it's suicide, I can't walk away. My heart clenched. Did you just, I whispered, say you love me? Henry leaned back slightly, just enough to look into my eyes. You've known it for a while, Emily. I was just waiting for you to be ready to hear it. Something cracked open in my chest, not breaking but blooming. The feeling of being seen, chosen, held. But one question still burned. Henry, why does the family want you back so badly they'd use me as bait? Henry exhaled, leaning back in his chair as if the weight on his shoulders suddenly doubled. Because I'm the sole heir. My heart skipped. I thought you left the family. I left the operations. I can't leave the bloodline. A chill slithered down my spine. So if you return, you'd become the head of the Sullivan family. The room went still. I straightened up. And they used me to lure you back. For what? Henry stared at me for a long moment before answering, because the head of the Sullivan family must have no weaknesses. And you, Emily, are the only weakness I've ever had. It felt like a sentence falling across my skin. So they needed to see what you'd sacrifice to keep me. Henry finished quietly. Pieces clicked into place. Daniel Vaughn, their sudden appearance. All of it a test. A merciless test. Henry didn't look away. Do you understand now? It's not because you're weak. It's because you make me weak. My chest tightened. That's not a bad thing. I whispered. You don't have to be heartless to survive. Henry shook his head slowly. In my world, weakness is death. He lifted a hand and brushed my cheek, his touch feather light like an apology carved into my skin. But what terrifies me most isn't my death. It's the possibility that you'll be pulled into it. I held his hand against my cheek. Then let me decide, Henry. For the first time in your life, let me choose our path. Henry stared at me longer than before. In his eyes, I saw every wound he hid, the loneliness, the scars too deep to bleed, the memories he feared would shatter me if spoken aloud. Finally, he lowered his lips to my forehead, a long, warm, heartbreakingly soft kiss. All right, then you choose. I lifted my face. Henry met my gaze and asked the question that tightened my chest, Emily. Do you want Henry Sullivan, the man in love with you? Or do you want the future head of the Sullivan family? I didn't have time to answer. The door suddenly shook hard. Bang! 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 Henry shot to his feet, his entire body tensing like a drawn bow. A deep, unfamiliar, authoritative voice boomed from the hallway at Henry Sullivan. Open the door! It's time for you to come home. My blood turned to ice. Henry looked back at me, eyes sharp as blades. Emily, behind me, no matter what you hear, don't step out. My heart pounded wildly. Someone had come to take Henry from me, and they weren't here to negotiate. That sound was not an ordinary knock. It was heavy, cold, and carried the authority of someone who had never once been denied anything in his life. Bang, bang, bang. The entire apartment seemed to tremble with each strike against the wood. Henry stood in front of me, his broad back straight and unyielding like a wall of steel. I clutched the hem of his shirt on instinct, and he gave my hand a brief squeeze, silent reassurance. Another knock came slower this time, but so forceful the lock rattled. Henry Sullivan. The voice outside was deep and resonant, like it rose from the bottom of a dark well. You've avoided the family long enough. Open the door. I saw Henry tilt his head slightly, as if trying to read the breaths on the other side of the thick wood. My lungs froze. Henry? Who is that? I whispered, barely audible. He didn't answer immediately. Then softly, so softly only I could hear, he said, Ian Sullivan. My uncle. Uncle another Sullivan. But the voice carried something far beyond family ties power. Henry stepped toward the door and gently pulled me behind him. Stay here. Don't move. No matter what happens, don't let him see you. I nodded quickly just as footsteps outside approached the threshold. Henry unlocked the door. It cracked open, and the man outside entered as if this place belonged to him, no permission required. Ian Sullivan was in his early 50s, tall, broad-shouldered, as if time itself had failed to erode him. His charcoal suit fit flawlessly, not a single wrinkle in sight. But it was his eyes that made my blood run cold, icy gray, razor-sharp void of warmth or expression. One look was enough to know this was a man unfamiliar with the word no. He scanned the apartment like someone inspecting inventory, then fixed his gaze on Henry. No affection. No family sentiment, only assessment. You've let the family search far too long, Henry. Henry stood tall, not submissive but not attacking either. I haven't been hiding Uncle Ian. I just don't intend to return. Ian smiled, a smile with no hint of humor. You may not intend to, but you're still the heir. The air dropped several degrees. You came for that, Henry asked, voice calm but lower than usual. Or because Vaughn sent word, Ian's eyes sharpened as they swept the room again. Vaughn said you have a problem that needs handling. I tightened my grip on Henry's sleeve. Henry's voice cut cold. There is no problem. I am no longer involved with the family. Ian actually laughed this time. Henry, no one in the Sullivan family is ever no longer involved. The blood still runs in your veins. Henry's jaw tightened. That blood doesn't give you the right to interfere in my life. I'm not interfering. I'm protecting. Ian's voice was quiet, like the sound of hail striking metal. Someone in the family intends to use her to drag you back. I came to clean up that mess. My heart jolted. Her. He didn't need to know my name. To him, I was an object that needed to be removed. Henry's head tilted slightly, eyes darkening. No one touches her. That's what I came to see, Ian replied. Just how far you're willing to go to protect her. Henry's fist clenched, far enough to cut ties with the family. Right now. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Ian stepped deeper into the apartment as though inspecting it for exits. I shrank further behind Henry. So this... He gestured lightly toward the room. This is the real reason you left the family. His voice sharpened. A woman. Henry didn't answer, and that silence was the answer. Ian stared at him for a long moment. Henry, the more you love, the more she becomes a target. You know that, don't you? I know. Henry's voice was steady, and that's exactly why I won't return. Ian raised an eyebrow. You're willing to give up the entire Sullivan legacy to protect one woman? Henry didn't hesitate even a single breath. Yes. Ian studied him for so long I could feel my pulse in my throat. Then he lifted his chin slightly, nodding toward the doorway. Leave with her. Tonight. My heart stopped. Henry frowned. What do you mean? Ian adjusted his sleeve, perfectly composed. Tonight, others will come, not to talk like I am. And they don't need to listen to explanations. Henry stiffened. Ian looked him dead in the eyes, speaking like a man delivering a verdict. You thought Vaughn acted alone. Someone higher up has issued the order to remove the threat. The threat. Me? My breath vanished. Henry grabbed my hand tight, protective, furious. Who? He growled softly. Who gave the order? Ian shook his head. That doesn't matter anymore. What matters is this. They're on their way. Henry pulled me closer. Ian continued. I'm giving you one chance to leave the battlefield before it begins. But if you're still in this city after midnight... He paused, then spoke with chilling calm. She won't live to see morning. I froze. My knees nearly failed. A flash of fury erupted in Henry's eyes. Feral, explosive. If anyone touches her, Ian lifted a hand, stopping him. Then the family loses a Sullivan. I know. And they know. Tension thickened like fog. Finally, Ian reached into his coat pocket. He placed a key on the table. A safe house, outside the state line. Leave now. Don't let anyone follow. Henry stared at the key, then at his uncle. Ian stepped toward the door, but before leaving he turned back, a flicker of something regret. Sorrow catching in his gray eyes. Henry, you're more like your mother than you realize. Henry went still. Ian added quietly, so softly I barely caught it. And that will either save you or kill you. The door closed behind him. Henry didn't move, didn't speak. He stared at the closed door, each breath heavier than the last, like he was holding himself together by force. Henry? He turned, and the look in his eyes, dark, sharp, determined, made my heart stutter. Pack your things. We leave in 10 minutes. I reached for him. Are you... okay? Henry leaned down, resting his forehead against mine. His breath trembled, but his hands were steady as they held me. Emily, I've never feared anything in my life. But when Ian spoke, he exhaled, voice low as a dying flame. It was the first time. I actually felt I could lose you. I wrapped my arms around him. Henry pulled me close, tighter than ever before, like he wanted to anchor me into his chest. I'm not afraid, I whispered. He lifted his head, his eyes dark as midnight gleamed with fierce intensity. You should be Emily, because tonight, we officially become enemies of the Sullivan family. I swallowed hard. Henry gripped my shoulders, and I swear his voice hardened into an oath etched into bone. Whoever comes for you, whether it's Vaughn or any Sullivan, I will not let them touch you. His lips brushed my forehead, warm and cold at once. Remember this, Emily. From this moment on, He pulled me against him, whispering like a vow burned into destiny. "You're not just the woman I love. You're the reason I'll betray my entire family." 10 minutes. That was the time Henry said we had 10 minutes to leave behind our old lives. 10 minutes to outrun the footsteps drawing closer through the dark. I stood in the small bedroom, hands trembling as I stuffed a few changes of clothes into a backpack. Every sound from the living room made my heart tighten, the sliding of a drawer, the clink of keys. Henry's footsteps pacing like a storm trapped inside glass. I didn't dare think too far. All I knew was this. Tonight I was abandoning my life for a man whose world I had known for only a few days. But my heart had never been more certain of anything. The door cracked open. Henry stood there in the shadows, his black coat draped over his shoulders, the warm yellow light outlining the sharp lines of his face. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice deep but softer than when he spoke to anyone else. "Almost," I whispered. He stepped in, took the backpack from my hands, zipped it with practiced precision. Then he lowered his head and pressed a kiss to my forehead. A short kiss, but one that warmed every inch of me with the cadence of his heartbeat. "Emily," Henry murmured, "if you're scared, just say it. I cut him off by taking his hand. "I'm not scared of you. I'm only scared that if we don't leave now, I'll lose you." Henry froze. A faint smile flickered in his eyes, beautiful but tinged with pain and gratitude. He squeezed my hand. "Let's go." The wooden stairs creaked softly beneath our steps. Henry walked ahead of me, never once letting go of my hand. He always walked like that, never allowing me to stand in front where danger could reach first. When we reached the bar floor, I glanced around carefully. The black lantern was pitch dark now, except for a single lamp above the bar, casting a lonely streak of gold across the wooden floor. No one was there. No voices, no laughter, no sign of Vaughn or anyone else. But Henry didn't relax. He paused, tilting his head toward the front door, listening to something I couldn't hear. "Is someone out there?" I whispered. "No, not yet." His voice was quiet but steady. "But they're getting close." A chill crawled down my spine. Henry walked to the liquor cabinet and pressed lightly on one corner. A soft click echoed. My breath caught as an entire wooden panel swung open, revealing a thin black metal door hidden behind it. "This is the escape route I prepared long ago," Henry said, gripping my hand tighter. For the nights I knew betrayal might come. Betrayal from who Vaughn Henry looked into my eyes, a look so deep it broke something inside me. From my entire family. The door opened fully, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Henry gestured for me to go first. I stepped down, and a cold wave of basement air wrapped around my skin. Henry followed, closing the door behind us, plunging everything into a dense darkness, lit only by small floor lights along the wall. We walked in silence. The sound of our footsteps echoed like two synchronized heartbeats, racing away from a destiny we never chose. After a while, Henry spoke low, barely audible. "Emily, remember this. No matter what happens, don't let go of me. No matter what you see, don't run alone." I nodded, even though he couldn't see. "I promise." He reached back for my hand and held it tight. We reached the end of the passageway, a tall steel door. Henry took Ian's key and slid it into the lock. The metal turned with a soft click. The door opened to a sweeping night sky. Cold wind hit my face, carrying the scent of damp grass and dew settling on asphalt. Outside was the bar's back parking lot, lit by weak yellow streetlights that flickered like dying candles. A black SUV waited for us. Henry tugged me toward the car. "The key your uncle gave you?" "It's for this," I asked. "Yes, if Ian wants us to survive tonight, this is the safest option." Henry opened the passenger door for me, and just as I placed my foot inside, a sharp metallic sound rang out behind us. Henry spun instantly. My breath stopped. From the far end of the lot, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Step by step. Slow. Too slow, like someone taking a leisurely stroll. Henry swore under his breath. "Vaughn!" My heart twisted painfully. He approached, long coat swaying with the wind, his face half-shadowed eyes gleaming with something disturbingly calm. "Henry?" His voice was smooth, deep chilling like a blade gliding across skin. "You think Uncle Ian can save you from the family?" Henry positioned himself in front of me, blocking the doorway completely. "Vaughn, move. Tonight isn't the night for games." "Who said I'm playing?" Vaughn tilted his head, eyes sliding toward me inside the car. I trembled. "Your girl," he asked mildly. "How natural." Henry stepped forward, voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Don't look at her." Vaughn chuckled softly, like a match being struck in the dark. "So it is real." A Sullivan guided by his heart. Henry said nothing, shoulders tightening, bracing for a fight. "You're planning to run away with her, Henry?" Vaughn asked, deceptively calm. "Escape the city like cowards?" Henry didn't waver. "I plan to live." Vaughn slowly pulled his hand out of his coat. "Not a gun, not a knife, just a phone." "Unfortunately," he said, unlocking the screen, "my orders are to stop you at all costs." Henry's muscles tensed. "If you defy the family," Vaughn continued softly, "the first one to die won't be you." His eyes met mine. Henry reacted instantly, fierce, instinctive, protective. "Vaughn." "I swear if you take one step." Vaughn lifted both hands slightly. "I'm not stepping forward." He stepped back instead. "Once? Twice?" Henry frowned. Vaughn's lips curled into a knowing smile. "I don't have to touch her. Someone else will." Henry's hands curled into fists. Vaughn turned to leave, but before fading fully into the dark, he raised his voice. "Henry, this is only the beginning. The moment you chose her, you pulled the entire Sullivan family down onto your head." His figure vanished. Henry stood frozen for a few seconds. Only a few, but I felt the anger, fear, and determination swirling inside him like a storm ready to break. Then he turned back, opened the car door, voice low and thunderous. "Emily." "Seatbelt." I swallowed hard. "Henry, will this ever end?" He looked at me, eyes burning like embers over ashes. "No." Henry slammed the door and started the engine. "It begins now." The SUV shot through the night like an arrow released from a bow, the streets of New Orleans shrinking behind us into streaks of blurred light. I sat in the passenger seat, fingers clenched around the seatbelt, while Henry, his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. The only sounds were the wind slicing past and Henry's deep, tense breaths. But I sensed something different in him, a silence unlike the cold quiet he wore when analyzing enemies. This was the silence of a man fleeing through the night with the woman he loved, uncertain how long he could keep her safe. I placed my hand on his arm. "Henry, we will make it to a safe place, right?" He glanced at me for just a second. His eyes softened, but deepened too, as though after all the fear, all the danger, the only thing he needed now was the reassurance that I was still beside him. "With you here, anywhere can become a safe place," he murmured. "And anywhere can become the most dangerous place in the world." I squeezed his arm gently. "I don't need to be safe on my own. I need you." Henry drew in a long breath as if my words had reached the part of him that had carried pain for years. "Emily, if this ends with me having to choose, do you know what I'll choose?" "You'll choose me," I said without hesitation. Henry's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'll choose to lose everything, as long as I still have you." When the dashboard clock flicked to 3:14 a.m., Henry turned onto a narrow road at the edge of town. Tall, shadowed trees lined both sides like giant arms closing off the sky. At the end of the road stood a wooden cabin. Not luxurious, not dramatic, just a small, quiet house tucked into the woods, its porch covered in fallen leaves. Henry parked the SUV. I gazed at the house. A strange calm washed over me, something I hadn't felt in days. "This is the place Ian mentioned?" I asked. Henry nodded, though his eyes kept scanning the perimeter, every branch, every corner of darkness. He got out, came around to my side, opened the door himself, and took my hand, as if I were the one thing he could not risk losing. "We'll stay here for a few hours," Henry said. Wait for sunrise, then keep moving. And where will we go? Henry looked at me for a long moment. North Carolina, then maybe Canada. Or somewhere even farther if you want. I want wherever you are. Henry froze. His shoulders trembled a barely there quiver that said more than any words could. A man who never flinched under gunfire, shaken by a single sentence from me. He pulled me into his arms. His embrace was strong, firm avowal without needing to speak one. Inside the cabin, the smell of old pine drifted through the still air. It felt like a place untouched for years. Henry checked every door, every window, every corner. He always did, never leaving a single gap through which danger could slip. When he returned, I was standing near a dusty bookshelf touching a frame with no photo inside. "Henry," I whispered. He came to me. "You think the family will find this place?" Henry's eyes shifted toward the night outside the window. "They'll find it eventually, but not immediately, and not in the same way they used to." "Why not?" He turned back to me, his gaze so deep it felt like it illuminated something inside my chest. "Because they finally understand." His voice was low, quiet, but unwavering. When a Sullivan son decides to turn against his family, they must rethink every move. Because they're not just losing a member. They're losing the best one they ever had. My heart tightened. Henry had never spoken about himself like that. I placed my hand on his cheek. "I don't want you branded a traitor because of me." Henry covered my hand with his, pressing it gently to his skin. "You didn't make me betray anyone. I'm betraying the darkness that raised me. And you." He leaned down and brushed a kiss against the back of my hand. "You're the first thing in my life that's ever made me want the light." Words failed me. Only warm tears slipped down my cheeks. We didn't sleep. Henry sat with his back against the wall, and I sat in his lap, my head resting on his chest. His arms stayed around me the whole time. Sometimes he kissed my hair. Sometimes he stayed quiet. But even in silence, I heard everything: his heartbeat, his breath, the fear he couldn't voice, and the love growing inside him like a steady flame in the cold. Around 5 a.m., Henry touched my chin, lifting my face so our eyes met. "Emily, I need to say something." I waited. He stroked my lips lightly, almost asking whether I was ready to hear it. "If you want to leave me, this is your last chance." I shook my head softly. "I'm not leaving." "Emily, going with me isn't just running for a night. It's running for a lifetime, and peace may never fully come. I know. There may be days I don't come back, I know." Henry pulled me closer, as if wanting to make sure I understood every word. "And people may call me a traitor, because I chose you over my family." I looked straight into his dark eyes. "But to me, you're not a traitor. You're a man who chose right." Henry's breath hitched. Then he kissed me, slowly, deeply, painfully beautiful. A kiss from a man who had lived in darkness his entire life, and finally found where he belonged. As the first light of morning crept through the trees and spread a thin golden veil over the cabin, Henry stood and helped me up. "It's time," he said, calm voice glowing with something new hope. Where first Henry gripped my hand tightly. "Somewhere no one can tear us apart. We'll build a new life. From zero, but together." I nodded. Henry opened the door, letting sunlight flood in. The light washed over him, over his hair, his face, and in that moment, he didn't look like a Mafia heir or the son of a ruthless dynasty. He looked like a man who had finally allowed himself to hope. He turned to me, extending his hand. "Emily, let's go." I placed my hand in his. The door closed behind us. The world opened in front of us, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of anything, as long as he still held my hand. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.